السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد يقول الله عز وجل في القرآن الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون وقال تعالى يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا ثم أما بعد. Our scheduled khatib couldn't be here, so we're going to improvise, inshallah. I remembered recently a story that somebody told me that they experienced. When I heard the story, I was so shocked, and I said, I wouldn't believe the story if I didn't hear it from the person who experienced it. The story goes as there's a brother who, older brother in the community who called his friend. And he said, he called his friend to his house, in his house, and his daughter, maybe who was 8 or 9 years old, picked up the phone, and he said, "Salam, wa alaikum salam, where's your dad?" And she said, "Well, he's not home." He said, "Oh, where's your grandmother?" And she said, the girl, she said, "My grandmother is doing push-ups." She said, "My grandmother is doing push-ups." He said, "Oh, I didn't think your grandma could do push-ups, but okay, I'll call back later." And the father came back home, and the daughter told him what happened, and so he called his friend back, and so he said, "I called earlier and you weren't home, and your daughter, told me that your grandma was that your mother was busy. What was she doing?" And he said, "Well, no, she just got done praying." And when you think about that, when I heard it, I was like, come on, man. I was like, this guy just made up a story. It's like one of those, it's too good to be true. Like, no, it's too bad to be true. And if I didn't hear it, like I said, from the person who made that phone call, like, Somebody said, oh, I heard somebody tell this, say somebody, I was like, yeah, people exaggerate. But I know this brother, he does fundraising, he does actually a principal of a school, and does a lot of good work. So the message of the story is that, if we don't educate our children, and sometimes there's a question onto when should I start educating my kids about Islam? When should I tell them what Islam is, who Allah is, who Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, who the companions are, what our history is, what we follow, why we look the way we look, why we walk the way we walk, why do we behave in the community and personally and interpersonally, and how do we communicate, and why are we Muslim? Like, when do you start to tell your children that? Right? And that's a question that, in fact, I had that question even before I got married, and then when I had kids, and when I actually had kids, if you ask me, when did you start telling your kids about Islam, or teaching them Islam, or showing them Islam, I would say from the day that they were born. Right? You start with the adhan in their ears. From that day on, they should hear the adhan every single day. Every single day, they should hear Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Every day. They should hear the Qur'an being recited in the house every day. They should learn about, who Musa was, and who Isa was, and who the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, who was Ibrahim alayhi salam, who they were. They should learn about that every part of, they learn about Bugs Bunny, and they learn about Mickey Mouse, and they learn about these things. Why? Because we teach them. We teach them. We let them watch Bugs Bunny. We let them watch Disney and this and that. Right? And you can't even say, well, there's no, back when I was growing up, 20, 30 years ago, there was none of this technology. I mean, technology was there, but there was no media for Muslims. We had Adam's World. I don't know how many of you remember Adam's World back then, but I think it still exists, that show. But it was a lame show. And we didn't really grow up on that, watching that. We watched it a little bit. But now there's story. I mean, there's so much media. You can just YouTube whatever Islam, Muslim topic, a story of a prophet, a story of a companion, it'll just come up. Comes up in audio format, video format, cartoons, whatever you want. So if your kids aren't watching it, it's your fault they're not watching it. What are they supposed to do? Go look it up themselves? And so you hear this story of a 9-year-old who doesn't know what Salah is. Doesn't even, forget that she doesn't pray. She doesn't even know what it is. And that's our fault. That's your fault as a parent. And so, all of our children, alhamdulillah, if you're praying in the house, almost all of our children at the age of 1.5, roughly, maybe even 1, would come, when we're praying in the house, would come and start praying next to us in some format. Right? Kids that are young, like 1 or 1.5, they can't bend their body in the same ways, even though they're flexible, they can't do those positions deliberately, like they can't do them volitionally. So, they might lay on the ground when you're doing sujood, right? They might do ruku in a funny way. They might do Allahu Akbar, in some way, but they're gonna imitate you when they see it long enough. So you don't have to tell them all of these things when they're 5 or 6 or 7. Maybe slowly you can. The more they understand, the more they do, the more you show them, this is who we are. What was the last time you're taking a trip, or you went out to the mall or to the store or somewhere else, and it was time for prayer, and you said, we're going to pray right here in the parking lot of some store. We're at the park, we're going to pray. It's Asr time, we have to pray now. Right? When you live that identity, when you live that every single day, your children will learn about Islam. This is what it means to be Muslim. It means that we worship Allah. We love Allah. We're going to worship Him no matter where we are. And this country is our country as much as it is anybody else's. And we're going to pray. We're going to pray wherever a public space is, because we pay taxes. We take care of these places just as much as everybody else. Right? But if you don't live that, then whose fault is that? And imagine, it's hard enough for, let's say, a convert who converts to Islam at the age of 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, right? And then they start to learn all of these things. And you say, well, where do I begin? Your kids shouldn't be like that, right? Your kids our children should have this inculcated part of their culture. This is what we do. It's sunset. Sometimes like, if I'm busy or if I just got home, the kids could look outside and see the sunset and say it's Maghrib time. If you pray Maghrib every day and you know when the time is, they'll say like, oh, we haven't prayed Maghrib. Right? Because you're in that routine. This is what we do. Do we have fun? Yes, we have fun. Do we love Allah? Who made all of this possible? Right? And so, talking to your children about this stuff regularly, right? Whenever you have the time, when we're having dinner, we'll have whatever discussion. It doesn't have to be something you prepare, but something you want your children to think more and more of. Because if you have several children, they're going to be several years apart. And some of it, the older people will understand, the older children, and not the younger children. But they'll remember some parts of it. Some parts of it. And recently I mentioned this in a previous khutbah. My children took a class on the seerah, and my 5-year-old daughter, she came and she told me a lot of enthusiasm that when the Prophet ﷺ, when he came back to Mecca from Medina, when he conquered Mecca, he forgave all of the non-Muslims. Right? So this, when you understand, and she didn't capture all of the history and the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, but she learned some things. The 7-year-old learned more, and the 11-year-old learned more. So, but you have to teach it. You have to speak. You have to talk about these things. And these people, the companions, the prophets, the messengers, all of these people should be, regular household names. You talk about something happens, you hear something in the news or something comes up in their work, and you say, oh, let's say they're doing a math problem and it says Isaac had this many candies. It's a math problem. You say, oh, do you know who Isaac was? Do you know who Isaac was? Right? So you can find these ways of talking about the religion, of making it a part of daily life. And when we don't do that, we have these kinds of problems. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq to look in our lives, do some introspection of how we interact with people. And even if you're older, you don't have little children anymore, it's still something to think about when you're interacting with other people. And obviously, giving advice to younger people, especially those who have children. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq to do this introspection and look at our lives and see how much we inculcate the deen of Allah into our lives and the lives of our children. Anything good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything wrong is from myself. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me and all of you. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ما بعد. There was a story, I'm sure maybe some of you have seen it. It was one of those videos that gets passed on WhatsApp a bazillion times, and Facebook and stuff like that. I haven't seen it, but I heard a sheikh talk about it. And the story is very interesting and probably reflects nicely, as opposed to most of the garbage that we see forwarded, on the reality. And the reality that it tries to explain is, why we should read the Qur'an. Why our children should read the Qur'an. Let's say I know some Arabic, I can understand some of the Qur'an, but our children who are 8 or 9 or 10 or 15, 20, they don't understand the Arabic language, right? So why should they read the Qur'an? And so this is a story between a grandfather and his grandson. And the grandfather is trying to tell his grandson, who is like 12 years old, he says, read the Qur'an, read the Qur'an. And and the son says, the grandson says, I don't understand what the Qur'an says. I don't understand this Arabic. I can read it, but I don't understand it. That makes me not want to read it. So what benefit does it bring me? And so the grandfather, he wanted to teach him a lesson, basically what benefit it brings him. So the grandfather, he went in the shed and he dug up, he found a bucket. And it was a really dirty, filthy bucket. He put holes on the bottom of the bucket. And then he told the boy, says, there's a stream down the block, down not too far from our house. Go get me some water from there. So the boy goes and he puts fills it up with water. And as he walks back, the water is leaking from the holes. By the time he gets back, the water is gone. And he shows the grandfather, he says, there's no water. And so, he says, if you want the water here, you got to run fast. You got to go fast. So he goes back and fills it up, walks back, goes, speed walking, comes back, and the water's gone. Then he goes again, he fills it up. This time he's running running, right? By the time he gets to the grandfather, the water's all gone. And so he says, look in the bucket. And so the grandson, he looks in the bucket. And he says, there's no water. But he says, look closely. And when he looked closely, he saw that dirty, muddy, filthy bucket was now pure and clean. It didn't have water, but it was clean. So, and the message that he wanted to teach him is that even though that you can't, get all of the meaning of the Quran, all of the message of the Quran, if you can't learn it, all of it, no worries. Because it still purifies your heart. It still purifies your life. And perhaps at some point, you start to close up those holes and the water isn't leaking as much, right? The more you learn, the more as you get older, some of the stories become clearer, some of the messages become clearer. And so you start to plug up those holes and you get to retain more and more of the water. But nonetheless, it has this purifying effect. And how often do we read the Quran in our houses? Ask yourself, how often, when was the last time you read the Quran out loud in your house? It's shameful. It's shameful. And it doesn't matter what your age is, whether you have little kids or not. Think about the nur, the light, the blessings that it brings in your house. Recite it loud and clear. Right? Just that, the effect on your house, on your soul, and also the effect on people around you. And so start with that bare minimum. Start reciting, you recite the Quran out loud in your house. And other people will listen to it and they'll get in the habit of listening to the Quran. They will get in the habit of listening to the Quran. And then perhaps they will start reciting with you, reading with you. And if we were to make a big circle and start reciting the Quran here, which people will read the Quran? The ones who read it when they were younger. If you never read the Quran in your house, if you never read the Quran, learned it when you were younger, you will always be reluctant and ashamed to read the Quran out loud. So it's very important. And don't think that this obligation is only for you to do to your children. No, it's for you to do to yourself. Because when it's Quran time and everyone's reciting, right? And so you can sit down, for example, at Maghrib time. And this is something that we used to do when I was young, and my father instituted in our house, that we would sit together between Maghrib and Isha, and everybody would read a few lines, and then we would read the translation of that. When you're younger, you don't even know what the translation means. Some of the words are so difficult, right? Your 5-year-old doesn't understand, have the same vocabulary as a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old. So they capture some things and they don't capture others, but they capture the environment. They benefit from all of that nur, the blessing. So inshallah ta'ala, I hope that we can start to inculcate the deen in our lives, in our daily lives, in our daily routines, such that everything becomes a reflection of the deen, a reflection of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do. Right? And so when we make our lives like that, then the kids, your children will understand. We do this because this is what our religion says. We do, and they're proud to be that way. But you have to explain, you have to talk about it. If you don't teach the deen, you don't talk about it, they will always be confused. And then later on, they don't have the foundation to even start building on that. But if they start building on that foundation of understanding, they love the Prophet ﷺ, they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they learn the stories of the Prophet, they learn the stories of the companions, they know the history of Islam to some extent. And then as they get older and older, they build on that more and more. And so, inshallah ta'ala, as we live our lives, we should make that routine. Find a time in the day that you sit and you recite the Quran out loud. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that you say, okay, kids, everybody gather around, we're going to read the Quran right now. No, why don't you start reciting first? Between Maghrib and Isha, every day, when the kids are home, everyone's there, you start reciting the Quran loud and clear. For 20 minutes, for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then after 2 weeks or after a month or 2 months, then you say, okay, how about everybody join me? We can all take turns reading 2 lines or 2 ayahs. And then we can read the translation. One of the things that I've done with my oldest, who's now 11, maybe when he was 8 or 9, was I read him the translation of Surah Yusuf. And he loved Surah Yusuf. And children generally it flows, the whole surah, it just flows from one story to another. And from that day, it's like, they'll, whenever we find time, it's like, oh, we haven't read the more meaning of the Quran. When are we going to do that again? And so, inshallah ta'ala, as you start doing this, they will start enjoying it more and more. And you will start enjoying it more and more. And Islam, the deen, will become part of their lives. It'll become part of their life. And then when you have a discussion about any topic, you can ask them, you can, you talk about, relate that to Islam, relate that to the deen, and help them understand how it connects to the greater society around them. So I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts all the efforts that we do, forgive our shortcomings, overlook our faults. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وآخر الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Straight lines. Silence your cell phones. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. ألم نشرح لك صدرك ووضعنا عنك وزرك الذي أنقض ظهرك ورفعنا لك ذكرك فإن مع العسر يسرا إن مع العسر يسرا فإذا فرغت فانصب وإلى ربك فارغب. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.